The morning it happened, no one saw it coming, not because they were not warned, because they stopped believing anything would ever change. The city had stood for generations. It had markets and walls and judges and law. It had everything a civilization is supposed to have, except one thing, and that one thing is what brought two figures through the gate at sunset, figures that were not human, and a clock that the city did not know was already running. Before we go inside Sodom, we need to destroy the version of it you already have, because the sin of Sodom that centuries of preaching have handed you is not the sin of Sodom that the Hebrew prophets described. Ezekiel 16:49 says this, plainly, without ambiguity. This was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy. Pride, excess of food, prosperous ease, closed hands to the poor. That is what the prophet said, not what the sermons say. And the distance between those two versions is the most disturbing thing about this entire story. Stop what you are doing. Close your eyes for just a moment. What the ancient sage is about to show you has been buried under centuries of convenient misreading. The Sodom in your imagination is wrong, not partially wrong, fundamentally wrong. A version of Sodom that is about one specific category of sin places that sin safely over there, in someone else. The version the prophets wrote does not stay over there, it follows you home. The real Sodom, the one described in Genesis with geographic precision, sat in the Jordan Valley, a location the text itself calls like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, fertile, watered, thriving. Sodom was not a wasteland, it was one of the most desirable addresses in the ancient Near East, a city of trade routes and city walls and complex political alliances, part of a confederacy of 5 cities, with a king, with an army, with courts of law. That is the city God destroyed, not a backwater, a civilization. And what it tells us about why civilizations fall is not comfortable. To understand Sodom, you have to understand what prosperous cities look like from the inside. From the inside, they look fine. They look productive. They look ordered. The powerful are protected by the law they wrote, and the people who do not matter are simply not visible. The Babylonian Talmud describes Sodom's internal legal system with a precision that is chilling. Because it was not lawless, it was precisely the opposite. Sodom had laws, very specific laws. Laws designed to protect the wealth and comfort of its residents from the inconvenience of outsiders. There was a law against giving food to a stranger, not a social norm, a law. There was a law that made charity a criminal act. If you were caught sharing what you had with someone who had nothing, the state came for you, not for them, for you. The Talmud describes one of Sodom's instruments of hospitality, a bed, standard size, fixed dimensions. Every guest received a bed. And if the guest was too tall, they shortened him. If the guest was too short, they stretched him. The origin of what we still call today a Procrustean bed, a solution that fits everyone, by making everyone fit the solution. But the story that the Talmud says reached heaven first was not about a guest. It was about a girl. A young woman of Sodom caught doing something the city had outlawed. She had given bread to a poor man. Secretly, someone saw, someone reported, the city convened. And its judgment was this: they covered her body in honey, and they placed her on the top of the city wall, and they waited until the bees came. The Talmud says it was her cry that reached God, not the practices of the men, not the general depravity of the streets, the cry of one girl being executed for the crime of feeding someone who was hungry. That sound is what opened heaven. Remember that, because it changes everything you think you know about why Sodom burned. Abraham lived within a day's walk of Sodom. His nephew Lot had made his home there, and when God decides to destroy the city, he goes to Abraham first. Abraham negotiates, not with another human being, with God. Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? If there are 50 righteous people in the city, will you really sweep it away? God says no. 45, 40, 30, 20, no, 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 no. What about 10? No. 10 righteous people would have saved the entire city. And when the angels arrive to count, they cannot find 10. Abraham stopped at 10. Why 10 specifically? Rabbinic scholars have noted for centuries that 10 was the minimum number for a Jewish congregation, a minyan, the smallest viable unit of communal religious life. Abraham was not asking whether there were good individuals in Sodom. He was asking whether there was enough of a living conscience left to change the direction of the city. And the answer was no. The conscience had been so thoroughly removed from Sodom's public life that not even 10 people who carried it could be found. 2 angels entered Sodom at evening. Lot was sitting at the city gate, where important men gathered and business was conducted. He saw them. He recognized immediately that they were travelers without local protection, and he did something dangerous. He invited them to his home, because Lot knew what happened to travelers in Sodom who did not have a local host. Before the night was over, the city came to his door. The men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house. All the people, to the last man. This was not a mob. This was the city expressing its official position on outsiders. What they demanded was not primarily about desire. It was about dominance. You have no rights here. You have no network here. Nothing protects you here. Here is what the story does not say. The angels were not afraid. They were not there to negotiate. They were not there to evaluate. The decision had already been made. The sentence had already been handed down. The only task remaining before sunrise was to get Lot and his family out. The clock was already at 0. The city just didn't know it. Centuries after the ash settled on the Jordan Valley, the prophet Ezekiel looked back at Sodom, and what he saw was not primarily a story about sexuality. What he saw was a mirror. This was the guilt of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters had pride, excess of food, and prosperous ease, but did not aid the poor and needy. They were haughty and did an abomination before me, so I removed them when I saw it. He lists 4 things before he reaches the word abomination: pride, excess of food, prosperous ease, failure to help the poor. 4 conditions of the spirit before the behavior they produced. Ezekiel was not describing an ancient oddity. He was describing a sequence that begins in the interior of a civilization that has become too comfortable to remember that comfort is not a right. Imagine waking up in Sodom on a Tuesday, the sun rising over the Jordan Valley, the smell of bread from the bakers, children in the streets, guards walking the wall perimeter, everything functioning, everything normal. You pass the same man who has been sitting near the eastern gate for weeks. You don't stop, not because you are cruel, because stopping is illegal, because someone might see. So you have learned not to see him. Everyone has learned not to see him, and he has learned not to reach out his hand. By afternoon, news has spread through the market. A traveler came through last night. Someone describes what happened, and people laugh. Not the laughter of monsters, the laughter of people who have been inside a system long enough that the system's cruelty has become their humor. The proof that they belong to the inside, and not to the outside. And here is the thing that is hardest to say. You did not feel like a bad person. You felt like a normal person. Because Sodom had done what every sufficiently powerful closed system eventually does. It had redefined normal. It had made cruelty institutional. It had made indifference legal. It had made mercy dangerous. And once a system does that, most of the people inside it are not villains. They are simply inhabitants. People who arrived in a world that was already shaped a certain way, who found the grooves and settled into them, who told themselves, this is just how things work. The same sentence humans have used to explain themselves in every system of organized cruelty, in every civilization that ever existed. Lot is one of the most uncomfortably recognizable figures in the entire biblical narrative. He lived in Sodom. He chose to live in Sodom. Lot looked at the Jordan Valley. He saw the water, the fertility, the opportunity, and he chose. The text says he moved his tent as far as Sodom, gradually, incrementally, first near, then inside. And yet the text calls him righteous, distressed. He knew. He saw it every day. It cost him something every day. And he stayed. Because this is not a story about Sodom. It is a story about the human capacity to live inside systems we know are wrong. Because leaving requires more of us than staying. And when the angels came to take him out, he hesitated, but he lingered. So the men seized him by the hand. An angel had to physically pull him away from the city. At the door of his own destruction, he still did not want to leave. The outcry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and their sin is very grave. Outcry. That word in Hebrew is za'akah. It is the same word used when Israel cried out under Egyptian slavery. It is not God's voice expressing displeasure. It is the accumulated sound of victims, the girl on the wall, the traveler without a host, the man at the gate that everyone had learned not to see. Their sounds did not disappear into the air. They went somewhere, and what came down in response to them was fire. For centuries, the destruction of Sodom was read as pure miracle. But geologists who have studied the Jordan Valley floor have found something that complicates that reading. The region sits on one of the most seismically active fault systems on Earth, the Syrian-African Rift, one of the longest on the planet. In 2018, a team of archaeologists published findings in the journal Nature about a site called Tal el-Hammam, located precisely where the Genesis narratives place Sodom. What they found was not consistent with any known pattern of ancient urban destruction. The temperatures reached were estimated between 2,000 and 4,000 degrees Celsius, above the melting point of bronze, above anything a human-made fire can produce. Vitrified pottery, melted mud brick, skeletal remains with signs of instantaneous extreme heat exposure, a layer of salt and sulfur over everything. Something, most likely a cosmic airburst, a meteor exploding in the lower atmosphere, struck the region with a force equivalent to over 1,000 Hiroshima bombs in a single moment. On a morning that began like any other, the angels gave one instruction as they pulled Lot's family out. Do not look back. Not as punishment for nostalgia, as protection from it. The one who turns back toward what is being destroyed reveals where they still belong. And Lot's wife looked back. The text says she became a pillar of salt. The rabbinic reading is not that she was punished. It is that she was revealed, that her heart had never left Sodom, that the body was moving forward while the soul was still standing at the gate. The pillar of salt was not what happened to her. It was what she already was. And here we arrive at the center of everything. The question that the popular version of Sodom is specifically designed to prevent you from asking. Why was the version of Sodom that centers one specific behavior so much more popular than the version Ezekiel gave? The answer is not complicated. The Ezekiel version is too close. Pride, excess, prosperous ease, closed hands to the poor. That is not a description of a distant ancient city. That is a description of any city that has become comfortable enough to call its comfort civilization. The popular version of Sodom points outward, at specific people, at the other. Ezekiel's version points inward, at the system. at what a society becomes when it organizes itself around protecting what it has at the expense of those who have nothing, at what happens when mercy becomes a liability, when charity becomes a crime, when the cry of the person at the gate has been so thoroughly normalized into background noise that the city no longer hears it. And here is the thing that makes this story not history, that makes it present tense. That city exists. That city has always existed. And every person who lives inside it tells themselves the same thing Lot told himself. At least, I'm not doing the worst of it. Sodom was not destroyed because it was strange. It was destroyed because it had become something cities become, when prosperity convinces them that what they have is deserved, and what others do not have is also deserved. There was a girl on the wall of Sodom, covered in honey, crying, and that sound reached somewhere. Before anything else did, the sound of one person being destroyed for the crime of having a heart. That was the sound that opened the sky. The fire did not fall because God grew impatient. It fell because the ones who needed mercy had been crying long enough. And the mercy that came did not look like what they expected. It came as ending, as the only possible reset for a system that had made cruelty into law. Sodom existed. Its people woke up on a summer morning with no idea it would be their last. Lot hesitated at the threshold. His wife looked back, and the valley that Genesis had described as the garden of the Lord became ash and salt in less than an instant. Not as the end of the story, as a warning inside it. But there is a question this story leaves unanswered. Sodom was destroyed, the valley was sealed, but something else was opened that same era. A door that only one man in all of recorded history ever walked through and came back to describe. Enoch, the man who did not die, who was taken, who saw what is on the other side of everything Sodom never reached. What did he find in the first 24 hours? What exists on the other side of the veil that Sodom's fire could not touch? That story is in the next video. Do not leave yet. What Enoch saw in those first hours will reframe everything you just watched.